Hello and welcome. I'm Lindsay, the National Educator for evanhealy, and I'm here today with our sanctuary recipient for November, CEO Sara Moncada from the Cultural Conservancy. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. So each month we donate $1 of our proceeds from our sanctuary collection to a different organization supporting human rights or environmental justice. And so our sanctuary collection is a small collection of beautiful products that support sanctuary for our skin, as well as sanctuary for the world. And I'm so happy to be here today to tell you a little bit more about our November recipient. So Sara, thank you again. I would love to share a little bit about, if you could share a little bit about yourself to our customers.
Sure. Well, Leos and Chanyevo, my name is Sara Moncada. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to step into a good circle with you all. I am the CEO of the Cultural Conservancy. The Cultural Conservancy is a Native-led nonprofit. We are based in San Francisco, which is on the unceded lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone, part of the Greater Bay Area Circle area. And we've been in business for a little over 35 years, and we are interested in Indigenous rights, revitalization, and protection.
Wow, that is so beautiful. So can you tell us, go a little bit more into the work you do at the Cultural Conservancy?
Yeah. So to be, let's see, how do I talk about our identity? I would say really we're in service to ancestral land and ancestral people. So what does that mean? It means that Indigenous people across this continent and every continent and other piece of rock on this beautiful planet, um, they're rooted in their lands, their original territories, their original spaces. That rooting informs who you are. It informs your language, your foods, your culture, your identity, your community. And that relationship is really born in the first peoples as first stewards of the lands upon which they stand. And that's a relationship, unfortunately, across the scope of this planet, and particularly here in the Americas, that is has an unfortunate history of colonization and disruption and violence. And we work to restore and revitalize some of those connections and celebrate the beauty of Indigenous people and make sure that folks know there's a lot there to see and to know and to love in that diversity. So we run a series of community projects. They're often as requests from community, especially in service to Indigenous folks. You never really want to show up there and think you've got the answers. Most times, most communities know specifically what they need. They just need the opportunity to ask for it. And we run anything from kind of language revitalization to land access to sacred site protection to documentation of aunties and elders talking about corn and all of those relationships in between. So we run both regionally programs on and work on the ground here across the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as nationally. We work across a national scope of Indigenous rights and recognition. And then we also have an international reach as well, where we work in Indigenous philanthropy and a small regranting fund that tries to give back on that larger scope across the Indigenous network of the larger web of the world.
Wow, that's so amazing. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved and your role?
Yeah. So I have one of those, I think I was mentioning earlier too. I have kind of one of those odd personalities. I haven't decided yet what I want to do when I grow up. I'm kind of leaving that open for much to consider. Eventually I will land in a certain place, I'm sure. But you know, as a scope, it's been a fascinating kind of run for me. I'm an artist, I'm a dancer. I started much of my life in that storyscape, in that voice and recognition of the arts as more than just cultural containers, but as educational encyclopedias. You know, a song can tell the story of an entire landscape, and a dance can be the embodiment of that knowledge system. And that is how I kind of entered the world and kind of found my voice as an artist, and, you know, kind of also exploring my identity as a mixed race person. My father's Indigenous. My father's family is deeply rooted in our Yaqui voice and our Yaqui systems. The Yaqui people are from the Sonoran Desert region, kind of what was before a Mexico and a United States. There was a beautiful land base and a territory before somebody drew a line on a map. And that territory is my traditional homelands that comes from the family of my father. I also have a deep ancestral relationship off continent through the blood of my mother. My mother's family, as she is also in her deep identity path, continuing through her own journey in life, I'm starting to get more and more rooted to understand that I have these deep songs and land traditions and histories that are rooted in Ireland and Scotland, and that those deep traditions also reverberate within me, and they inform how I enter the world. And so as I've explored myself as a person, kind of walking into worlds and trying to bridge that scape, I have found that you look out into the world and you see that in a lot of places. And many folks are struggling to kind of find ways to connect and reroute or educate or, you know, crack a door, learn something a little bit more. And that's been kind of the course of my life in my kind of arts and non-professional life. But then in my professional life, you know, I grew up in my kind of later adolescence in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm from the dot-com boom here, you know, kind of went into the technology swell in the early 2000s, and really went on a good corporate ride. And then years later, kind of stopped and went, I don't like the corporate thing quite as much as I used to, maybe. And wow, what an amazing experience, and truly a you know, an MBA program on the job is an incredible lived experience moment. But I found I was out of step, and I needed to be in service somehow a little differently. And so I made the big leap, and I went, oh no, I'm going to let go of the corporate paycheck and that really wonderful lifestyle for a second, and take a step back and try and figure out what to do. So I actually ended up going back to school, which was interesting. And I went back and finished my master's as an adult and as a mom. But I also found that I engaged in school differently too, because I had all this lived experience behind me, and I now kind of knew what I wanted to explore more. And it was the intersection. It was the intersection of myself as an artist, as a cultural artist, myself as a person looking to explore how you can use your work life in service differently than just in the, you know, pursuit of a good paycheck. And also education. As an Indigenous person going back into the education arena, not really seeing a deep reflection of knowledge systems that were more diverse, not really seeing a deep reflection of that scope of possibility, where you could walk and say like, oh, there's a lot of different ways to approach that water system, you know, or, oh, there's a lot of different ways to approach that conversation about how to protect that site, you know, whatever that scope might be. And so it was the intersection of all three of those things that landed me at the door of the Cultural Conservancy. The founding CEO, Melissa Nelson, an amazing Anishinaabe, Métis, Norwegian woman, and deep sister, had been at the helm of the Cultural Conservancy for a little over 2 decades. And the Cultural Conservancy is on the precipice of a moment where it could grow and make a big decision as a small grassroots Indigenous organization, you know, squirrely out there on the ground helping community, potentially engage in some of these larger social justice movements of our time, like land return and the larger conversation of Indigenous voice that's really risen to the forefront in our current day and age. And she was really looking at that, and we went for a walk, and we had and my daughter was with us, and she was like 2 or 3 at the time. She was kind of toddling between the two of us, and we went for a walk. And I said, tell me about your work and what you do. And she said, I'm looking for ways to innovate and take it to the next level. And with your corporate background, I'm interested to know what some of your ideas might be. And it just started a conversation that didn't end. I'm not actually sure when I started working for the Cultural Conservancy. I think it was probably that day, but it just grew into relationship. And so I've been working in relationship with the organization for 6-7 years now. And my succession into CEO was really about relationship. And I wonder if that too isn't a bit about our Indigenous value system as an organization. Melissa, kind of looked at me and said, I need succession. And I looked at her and said, I'm not interested in a system that replaces its long-term leaders and elders. I'm interested in a system that honors them. And I'll be willing to have succession conversations with you if you promise you won't go anywhere. And we made that deep agreement, and we went through a 2-year succession process that was about not the ambition of elevating an individual, but an investigation with the many circles of team and community and family to find out how you strengthen a circle and call individuals in that circle to rise up in service in new ways. I was really just called, and I answered the call, and that was a beautiful unfolding, and a succession process that, coming from corporate America and turn and burn, and you have the next CEO, and they come in and they sweep house and they bring in their execs and their team, and this is a much more common model. And boy, it was just incredible to walk through the antithesis of that. And now Melissa Nelson's the chair of our board, and she's our president emeritus, and she's deeply involved in the ongoing knowledge system as the elder, as the reigning elder. She's here, she's guiding us, she's mentoring us, she's reminding us to remember our roots and where we came from and why we stand where we are. So that was kind of a long explanation, but that is my journey to where I stand in the organization today. And it's a journey that was shared by everyone. It's really special.
It's so beautiful, Sara, and the way you've incorporated, all of your vast experience and your innate knowledge to just all come together to bring you where you are today. It was beautiful to hear that story. Thank you. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about, we've talked about your history and brought that together, a little bit more about the beginnings of the Cultural Conservancy and its history.
Yeah, such an important history to talk through. Thank you. Because and I love it, because really the Cultural Conservancy was originally called the Sacred Land Foundation, and it was started by 2 well-meaning white ladies. Mm-hmm. They were incredible. One was an environmental kind of lawyer, land rights, loud activist, amazing. The other was this beautiful, kind of rooted, amazing educator, knowledge holder. And they came together in this partnership. And one of the first things that they did was work in service to the folks out in Hawaii, on Kauai, who were looking to get access to land that was being held by the National Park Service. And it was all about sacred site access. And so if you think about that back 35 plus years ago, these ladies were ahead of the time. And though they helped bring a first suit, and though that suit ultimately was not successful, the one that came right behind it on precedence was. And so these ladies really, they broke ground in trying to help create conversation and dialogue around Indigenous access, specifically within, the national park system and the lands that they hold. Because let's face it, those spaces that were held by the National Park Service are often the sacred spaces, because they're so beautiful, of their original folks, right? We all know they're beautiful. We all agree collectively on that, right? But we all need to be able to access them for varying purposes and varying reasons. And this was some of that first work. So that was just really, really beautiful. And then again, another just deep bow to these women and how ahead of them of the times they were. They quickly looked at each other and said, oh my gosh, if we're going to work in service to Indigenous folks, we should have an Indigenous person at the helm of this organization. And we need that voice to be up front and center. And they went out into the world and found Melissa. And that's how the organization got started. The name change happened about a decade or so into their business. They were the Sacred Land Foundation, and they became Sacred Land Foundation, the Cultural Conservancy. And that was an interesting shift too, because in a way, what Melissa helped them kind of come to was that, yes, land, but land and culture, because it's the relationship that happens when we as ecological beings, we as humans we put our hands in the earth, we put our relationality into that circle. And that is a system, and that system is part of that relationality. And so that was the growing of that. And interestingly, now in 2021, or previously, because we started this project earlier than that, but as we're realizing it now in 2021, we've in a way come back to our roots, because the Cultural Conservancy has just now walked through a land return project. And that is a fairly monumental moment. It's historical. It's historical for the organization. It's historical for many reasons. This is a new movement in our world, this land return, this land back conversation around Indigenous folks. And it's such an important one. And we're now walking through it and trying to learn and trying to document that model and make it available to our communities to continue to learn and build from. But it's a big project, and it's no small feat.
Wow. Congratulations on what a great accomplishment that is, and to come all that way. Could you, I know you probably said it, but what year did you say that the Cultural Conservancy began? Was it?
I'm gonna missay it. It's in the 1980s. I should know that. And without clicking around a bunch, I will misspeak, but a little over 35 years. I think we're in our 36th or 37th year. So mid 80s. Yeah.
That's perfect. That's amazing. That's some longevity. And also to hear that your accomplishments, it took determination and some time and patience to come to this point.
Yeah. Well, when I've come to really learn this from my community and my elders. And I think it was part of kind of my recovering corporate-aholicness, right? I was kind of just coming to this. I kept getting reminders, Sara, time is long.
Yes.
Don't have to be in a hurry. And that that is such a beautiful and important reminder, because I think in our current models, it's the opposite. In our current models, it's we don't have time, get it done, and push. And I bow to my community, I bow to my family and my elders, and my reminders that time is long.
Yes.
Time is long.
Thank you. Beautiful. So now that we have a little bit about your history and the Cultural Conservancy beginnings, can you tell us a little bit about your current events?
Yeah. Yeah, well, as I was just alluding to, this is the biggest moment that has happened to us in our recent history, is walking through a land return project. And this was started a number of years ago in conversation with a private individual who owned land in Sonoma County, heart of the wine country here in Northern California. And this elder woman, no extended family to speak of, has been holding for much of her adult life the intention of returning land to Indigenous people of the area. I believe that she came to this, through the course of her life, through her own experiences, and she talked about the decisions that helped her get to that space loosely. And I would never want to share her story for her. But part of the learnings that I received was that many of us don't always know the ripples that we leave. And she was a very young person being raised in a wealthy family at one point in Central America, and it was the love that she received from her Indigenous Mannies and their families, um, and the community connection of that time that she spent being raised in those circles. Though she was a privileged, kid in that moment, the Indigenous communities of the area, they saw past that, and they really welcomed her into a family situation and a circle of real community and connection and warmth and beauty that lasted, and it rippled through her life, and it left an echo that had her exploring the relationship of Indigenous people to larger communities through most of her adulthood. And she originally reached out to the ancestral folks of the land of Sonoma, which is currently held by the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. They're the locally federally recognized tribe of the region that represents the body of Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo folks. Again, those lines on maps, those things are rough. Around here, territories and things, not like somebody, drew a stick and said, okay, well, you stop here and I start there. Back in the old days, there was a lot of movement and a lot of recognition of the resources of land. So it's a complex story. And we entered into conversations with them too, and said she's trying to return land to us, but we're an intertribal organization. We're not the first people. And in direct response to our mission and our creed, we say we're connecting ancestral people and ancestral lands. That's not us. So we'd like to make sure that we can help facilitate this with you. And Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria looked at us and said, thank you for walking in protocol. Please accept it on our behalf. And we were floored. And we quickly went through due diligence and checked with our board, and had to go through real fundraising, because let's face it, this is the San Francisco Bay Area. Land here is extraordinarily expensive, astronomically expensive, and completely out of reach for Indigenous folks. Even as a small Indigenous family around here, a starter home is unachievable. So the responsibility of that, once the permissions were there and the protocols were there, I mean, we really, Melissa and I spent a long time talking and walking in the forest and meeting with our board and meeting with the California Native Advisory Council that we created to help have this conversation, and the intertribal groups that we created to help have this conversation. And we found our way. And so right now, as it stands, our #1 project is this beautiful land. Because while it's a land return and it was gifted to us at a 50% market rate discount, severe discount donation, we still had to raise the money to get the other half. And one of the things a lot of folks aren't remembering or maybe realizing, and we didn't know all the way until we stepped into it, is once you give land to a group, that's a lot to take on. We weren't well equipped for, oh, you have to rehab a well, and oh, the barn's falling over, and oh, the pesticides being used at the vineyard next door, impact what can happen on your watershed, and property taxes, and the like of it. And so we slowed down, we got our feet under us, we met with our community, we said, okay, we're going to create this space as an Indigenous biocultural heritage oasis. We are going to run ecological revitalization projects, Indigenous sciences, and Indigenous land connections here. And we're going to have to focus on raising money to do that. Because nobody tells you you need that extra $1 million just to get the projects up and running when you get land. So that's where we are. We're in a good fundraising mode, and we're working with community. And we've even been able to host community there in the time of COVID. We had a local partner down the road who was running an Indigenous youth camp as part of the California Indian Museum and Cultural Center there in the region. And they needed a place to gather outside safely for their youth during the summer camp. And we were able to provide that and provide a safe outdoor space to gather that was culturally relevant, culturally rooted, and in service to community immediately. And that was very special. So that's what we're doing right now. We're building Heron's Shadow. Come out and visit. It's really beautiful.
I would love to. Oh my gosh. And congratulations. What an accomplishment. And just hearing about all the different layers and all the how adaptable and resilient you had to be throughout all the phases of this project. It's amazing.
Yeah. And why I said it was so important to us to document it. We need to be a learning model. And that's one of the things that we're doing. So we've partnered, we have a beautiful media director, Nate, for our native media work. And we work in protocol with community, and we are documenting probably even a little too much, maybe. I don't know, like the drone flies by and I see the neighbors go like this. But, we're trying to really capture what's happening there. We're doing everything from, ecological site restorations. Part of the watershed that we have on our land, it turns out, is a headwater for a traditional coho salmon run that has not been reawakened in that region in 100 years, and we could potentially impact that. We also have as part of that system there, we're in Northern California, which in the last 4 to 5 years, you've noticed fire is become a massive part of our conversation. And our land, the last 3 years running, not this year, but the last 2 years prior to that, was in evacuation zone. And so how do we come back to a good fire conversation? Because fire tending has been part of Indigenous folks' land tending practice in California for thousands of years. And now that it's out of balance, we're seeing what some of the outcome of that is. So how can our knowledge system and practices on the land there, we want to do controlled burns. How can we do that to help elevate a larger regional knowledge system around traditional fire tending and the benefits that that can have on our current models and our current climate strangeness? So the possibilities are endless, and our minds are kind of like this right now. But it's a really good problem to have. I like this problem. I'm excited and I'm inspired by this challenge. Yeah.
I'm inspired hearing about it. And so you've been documenting this journey. Will there be a place to learn more about and maybe see some of your documentation or some of this journey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can visit our website at nativeland.org. And right there in our programs, I invite you to dive right into that media section. Our media work that shows some of our collaborations and partnerships is kind of a long history of these little mini conversations that have been having over the landscape. that we're now getting to have in much larger way on our own landscape. And those are starting to elevate too. So nativeland.org, you can visit the media work there. We have a resource library that we try to make available to community, also all in good protocol with right permissions. And we have a beautiful page dedicated to the building of Heron Shadow. So you can go there and see some of our pictures and see some of our dreaming, some of our visioning, some of the folks that are coming and leaving their sweat equity and their visioning equity there as part of the conversations. And then at the end of this year in December, we're releasing our first little mini film piece that will really talk about the land campaign itself and our plans for creating it in a way that's sustainable, so that it's there for my daughter's daughter to access and see herself and her culture and her voice reflected in, and hopefully help it continue to ignite those conversations across the region. So continue to check back in with it, because it's updating constantly.
Amazing. I'm so honored that we're able to partner with you in this way and learn more about your organization, and it's just so happy, inspired by all of the work that you're doing and all of the joy you share with us. Just your presence alone is just delightful. So thank you so much, Sara.
Well, thanks for having us, and thank you too. It's important, I really, as much as this world and our social justice movements, remind us, especially now, that we have good work to do in our human condition, don't we? I really, one of the other reasons I think I landed at the Cultural Conservancy is because, we're the love warriors. It's the place that we acknowledge, yes, the conversation is hard, and yes, it comes from some dark places, but we can battle that with the light. And we build our networks and our allyships like our grandmother web. We've never existed as a human species ever alone in this world. And it is the strength of our many circles together, our sacred hoop dance, that brings us back into good relation with one another, that creates networks of resiliency and allyship. And anytime an organization such as yours steps up into the world and says, how can I be a good ally? How can I show up to be a good partner in that space? I bow to it, especially when you mean it. And it really matters, and the echo of that matters. So thank you for the good work, and thank you on behalf of all of those that you elevate. I know you shift monthly in your philanthropic vision, and thank you for elevating across many communities. We need more of you to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Sara. So many lessons today. Thank you. And thank you everyone who joined us today. Much love. Bye.
Take care.